everybody, my name is Janet. Welcome to Janet Asks. If you are a high schooler like me who also struggles in figuring out what you want to do when you grow up for your career life, don't worry because this channel is for you. I'll be interviewing people of all different occupations, and hopefully that could help you understand these careers a little bit better and help you figure out which career is best suitable for you. So let's get started. I'm so excited for today's special guest because he is a very funny and charismatic guy. He has a very unique career story, and he actually started out as a teacher and principal, and then he became a business development manager in Facebook. And I'm very excited to learn more about his job. So everybody, let's all welcome Tony. Hi Tony, how's it going?
Good. Hi, Janet. Going pretty good. I mean, it's 2020 for all of us, so maybe that question is a bit loaded.
Well, thank you so much for coming here on Janet Asked. I'm so excited to learn more about your job as a business development manager.
Wonderful.
So, first question, what exactly is your job? I said before that you're a business development manager, but can you explain what exactly that is and what do you do as a business development manager?
Sure. So what is my job specifically? Well, my title is actually Strategic Partnerships Manager. I currently work at Facebook. The one way that I would describe business development or partnerships, as it were, is we look for opportunities and try to bring those opportunities to fruition. So you can imagine, you've heard of people looking to close big deals. Well, what are those big deals? How do we identify them? Who do we need to inform about these big deals? What teams do we have to work with? What kind of plan do we have to set in place in order to make it all happen? So I would say probably similar to real estate development, right? Where you're looking for opportunities. You have an idea of, which properties are hot, which type of people would be best suited for those properties and the likelihood to buy. Similarly, I would say business development is doing the same thing. As you're looking for opportunities, you're seeing which one of those fit into your strategic plan and what you're trying to accomplish, and then you basically rally the team or teams around making it happen.
Wow, that sounds like a very cool job. Let's start from the beginning. Could you briefly explain your career journey and how did you start and how did you end up becoming who you are today as a business development manager?
Yeah, absolutely. So my career journey, I would say, was atypical. As an undergrad, I majored in mechanical engineering and sculpture. And so I thought I was going to be a sculptor or an architect or something along those lines. Wasn't quite sure. And when I was in school, unfortunately for me, many companies were not recruiting mechanical engineers. They did recruit mechanical engineers for what you would imagine they do, but I did not want to make weapons. I did not want to make industrial processes and things of that nature. And so I wound up skipping the country and I went to a small place called the Republic of the Marshall Islands, and I taught English, science, and math and doubled as a principal of an elementary school. That for me was really pivotal when I think about my career journey. It got me into education. After that, I taught for 4 years at the high school level. I taught geometry, algebra 1, algebra 2, pre-calculus, financial literacy to 10th, 11th, and 12th graders before going to business school. My reason for leaving the classroom is I really wanted to have an impact on a much larger scale than the students and families I was privileged to work with, a couple dozen or a couple hundred at a time. After business school, I got into consulting. And so I was doing nonprofit consulting. And then, so what that was like is it's a client services role where you are working closely with community leaders or industry leaders and helping them solve problems. It's essentially what consultants do. And we do it in a very data-driven way. And then I got into tech. So I got into ed tech. I was working at a company called Piazza, which is a way for students to ask and answer questions in their college classrooms. And then subsequently made the move to Leap, where we were building an engine to help people find the right career for themselves. And then we all joined Facebook. In each one of those roles, what I would say is, particularly my last few, so at Leap, at Piazza, also I would say probably in consulting, is there were certain skill sets that were transferable. So the idea of using data to identify opportunities, working on building relationships, I certainly learned a lot in my teaching days, and that people don't really care how much you know until they know how much you care. And I've carried that with me in each of those roles, from a business development standpoint, right? So when you think about how do you identify opportunities, how do you build relationships, how do you rally people to make those opportunities turn into reality, all of those skills along the way in that career journey, I think were really helpful for me. So that's how I got to where I am now. Currently, I'm working mainly in e-commerce at Facebook and Instagram. So if you've made any purchases on Instagram, it's likely that our team was the ones who brought on those partners. And so when we think about, from a Facebook and Instagram perspective, which companies out there would be best suited to be selling their goods on Instagram? We identify those partners. We interact with those partners. We also work closely with our cross-functional team. So that would be product, engineering, marketing, um, product marketing, and you can imagine to make to get these partners onboarded, including our operations team. So that's long story long to how I got here.
As you know, my channel is geared towards like teenagers or high schoolers. So what do you think would be appealing to them about your job in business development? And what's your favorite part about your current job?
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good question. I can imagine, back to when I was in your shoes as a junior in high school, seeking opportunities, maybe doing my own thing. I was actually doing climate research when I was in your shoes many, many, many years ago. But what do I think high schoolers would find interesting about this job? I think first, let me say, what you major in does not necessarily determine what you do with your time and with your life and with your interests. I've always been interested in connecting with people ever since I was young, before high school, during high school, after high school. I've always been really interested in solving problems. I've always been really interested in kind of winning, as it were, right? Whether I was playing sports or I was working in community service and then helping others feel successful. I think one thing that would be appealing is that sense of being able to really deeply connect with other people, understand what they care about, what their business cares about, what kind of problems are they trying to solve, and really rolling up your sleeves and using all the skills that you've learned, the math that you've learned, the history, all of that comes into context and helps you develop your unique opinion and perspective of how you're going to help this particular person or create something that hasn't been created before. I think that's one really cool thing that might appeal to students who are in your situation as you all are thinking about going to college. What do I like most about my job? I'd say it's twofold. On the one hand, I really do enjoy solving problems for other people. But I also think it's in my DNA to make others successful. And that translates really well on a one-to-one basis, as you mentioned. Yes, I used to be a teacher, but also from a business perspective too. When we think about how do we make our clients, how do we make our partners successful? How do we identify problems that they're having and help them solve them? How do we help them grow their businesses? Like that's all really, really interesting stuff from my standpoint. And then the people. I mean, folks who tend to go into this kind of profession like to talk, as you will see in this video. So never really a dull moment, but
So both of your jobs requires some leadership and management. So what do you think is similar between managing like kids and managing like partnerships and people in business? And how do you think that's different?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting question. I appreciate you asking that. I'd say probably the biggest similarity is at the end of the day, it all boils down to the people, right? So whether, on day one, I remember coming into, I had a sophomore class in Boston. Day one, I came in and I had a student say to me, "Oh, Mr. Luckett, you're from New York City. Are you a Yankees fan?" Now, mind you, out here in California, people probably don't care, but the sports rivalries are pretty intense between Boston and New York. And immediately I looked at this student and I said, "You have an F until further notice." Now, of course, I wasn't being serious, but I had to let that individual know that I understood where they were coming from, but also that I knew what they were trying to do, and they weren't going to take control over the situation and blah 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 blah. That's one of my, I mean, that student and I still have a relationship till this day. He's married, he has kids of his own, but we've maintained that relationship, and I think that's a really powerful, when you think about like that overlap of what the type of skills or the type of interpersonal interactions you're going to have in teaching. I think the way that translates over to business is it really forces me to lead with empathy, to try and put myself in the shoes of the client or put myself on the same side of the table as the client. And so whether I'm having, a joke moment, with the client, or I have to deliver some really bad news to them, it's helpful that I've built that rapport. It's helpful that I've been able to, develop and cultivate a relationship over time. Again, going back to, I can have all the resources in the world, right? I can have all the knowledge in the world. I can have all the analyses, but at the end of the day, if the client doesn't feel like I have their best interest or the best interest of their business at heart, none of that matters. And I think it's the same thing for students, right? If they knew that I was just there to collect a check versus being very invested in their learning, and helping them solve their problems and figure stuff out, I think it'd be very different.
Mhm. Can you explain what some of the most difficult parts about your job currently?
Yeah. So the most difficult parts of the job, I'd say, to piggyback off my previous answer, is the people. And so sometimes, getting to know someone or building that relationship over time can be very beneficial. And other times it can be a burden, where you may not be able to give the same time and dedication to this partner as you did last half or last quarter, and they're asking a lot from you. And so how do you effectively turn them down or manage their expectations in a way that doesn't damage the relationship? I think that's one really hard part is the people. I think number two is really around making sure that you're building your business intuition with a combination of both quantitative and qualitative information. So on the quantitative side, certainly, like general market analysis, you'd want to understand what the opportunity size is. You'd want to understand who the different players are in the market, but you'd also want to have some qualitative information to help you in your decision making. That may be the unique context or the composition of the team, for that you're most interacting with from a client perspective. So that's, I think, is really challenging. Is it's constantly evolving. Like building that intuition is a learning process, and it requires maintenance. It requires management itself. Um, and then I'd say that probably the third most challenging thing about the job is just, you know, getting disappointed, like the negotiation and you don't win, like when the deal doesn't happen, and it's something that was out of your control or in your control. I mean, that disappointment can weigh on you. Uh, but you practice empathy, you practice resilience, you lean on your team, and you're able to get through it.
Yeah, I like what you said about how like one of the hardest part is like building relationships with people. I mean, that's always hard. So can you give a quick like run through of what a typical day of your job is like?
Absolutely. Happy to give you a typical run through. So um, each day is kind of different. Some of this is by design, and some of this is just the nature of the work. So what I mean by design is we have certain days where we block off time that we don't have any meetings. Now, the reason why we do this as a team is to help us get work done instead of constantly having to put out fires or answer emails or take a call or blah 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 blah, right, and so on. So the part that is variable, and that kind of depends on which fires you're putting out on the days where I do have calls or I am responding to emails. I'd say it goes a little something like I spend a greater part of, and this is assuming that I've planned either the night before or the week before, right? As an example, is what I would do is I would plan out, the 3 to 5 things I know I need to accomplish on this day. And then there is a combination of internal meetings, external meetings, and then work that happens in between. So internal meetings really should only happen to add value to help you with your external meetings and or get your work done. And so I work with a couple of different teams, seller marketing, I work with our ops team, I work with our data team, and we're working on a couple of different projects for internal process improvement as an example. I also have another work stream that involves outreach. And so working very closely with our automation team on how do we make ourselves better in terms of reaching out to leads and keeping them warm and ultimately getting them to sign on to our product, right, which is commerce at Facebook and Instagram. So those are kind of like 2 big chunks of the day. The external meetings with partners at this point is either I'm helping them answer questions and inform their strategy for either the rest of the quarter or now at this point going into 2021, or I'm helping them put out fires. And so sometimes support tickets that they would raise aren't getting the traction that they need to solve a business problem immediately. So I can step in, try and understand quickly what's going on, maybe get some additional eyes on the problem and help them solve the problem faster. But my day is typically broken down into those 3 chunks, and then it fluctuates. So I typically like to take my meetings in the morning. Um, or what I'll do is I'll give myself a buffer because I do my best thinking in the morning. So maybe I'm doing my own work for an hour or two before jumping into team meetings or doing external meetings.
Um, so in general, what do you think success looks like in business development?
Yeah, I would say there's probably a spectrum, right? And so I would not want listeners or your classmates or whoever's tuning in to think there's one kind of BD or there's one way to do things. I would say it's probably a spectrum. You have on the one hand like someone who's just selling, right? Like I just need you to say yes, and now that's it. And then you have like someone, so it's probably more like hunting, right? And then you have like something that's like gathering or farming, right? And so that's like more like account management. So you're working closely with a small set of partners or what have you. You're cultivating them over time. You're helping them grow over time. I think that's a part of it, right? So on that spectrum of whether you're hunting for new business or you're sort of gardening and cultivating existing business, um, I mean, both of those I would say like require like different skills, but it also depends on like what your interest is. And so, when you think about like what success looks like, if you're on the hunting side, it's like how many kills did you get, right? Like, how many animals did you bring home, right? How many companies or deals did you close? If you think about it on like the account management growth side, it might be more like what's the incremental, right? Like what percentage did this business grow by? Like was it the number of transactions? Was it the revenue, and so on and so forth? And so success can look like a couple of things, but I would say, in general, there's the what. And the what is what I just described. It's the hunting, the gathering, it is the, creating the deal with your legal team and like getting your legal team and the partners' legal teams together to hash out the details. Like that's the what, right? It's like all the steps that need to happen in order to identify the business, warm them up, build a relationship over time, ensure that your deal closes and that the partner is successful. That's all the what. Then there's this other parallel track called the how. It's like, how do you do it? Well, if Tony's a jerk, right, when he goes and has these conversations with people, people will remember that, right? If I'm unprepared, right, when I show up to a client meeting and I don't know what the agenda is going to be and I'm not quite sure what the outcomes I'm looking for, like, that's the how. And if I don't do it in a way that's thoughtful, if I don't conduct my business in a way that shows professionalism, that's able to build rapport, like everything can go south there too. So I'd say, long story long, again, you gotta like to talk, right? Um, Winning looks like a couple different things depending on where you fall in that beauty spectrum, and then also like how you go about conducting your business, and making sure that when people walk away, they'll be like, yeah, they want to do business with you again.
Yeah, I like your analogy with like the hunting and gathering. We're on the last question. Basically, if you could give advice to younger high schoolers or college students who want to pursue their path in business or business development, what kind of advice would you give them?
Oh, this is a tough one. What kind of advice would I give a bunch of people that I don't know well? So this is going to be generic advice. Take it with a grain of salt. My suggestion is going to sound somewhat contradictory. On the one hand, if you know that business development or sales, account management, like that spectrum is what you're interested in, get started early. Shadow someone, have conversations with friends, colleagues, aunts, uncles, relatives, whatever the case may be, and find out, what industry do you want to use your time and your skills in, and get clear on that. I think the other piece of advice that I would have would be like, it doesn't really matter what you do first. you know, it's now that I'm much older and have that perspective, I think it's okay to have a circuitous path, and to dabble. There's a phrase that I think a lot of us have heard before, like a jack of all trades, right? And so my understanding of the full phrase is a jack of all trades and master of none is often better than master of one. So unless you know 100% you were put on earth to paint, or 100% you were put on earth to make machines, right? Whatever the case may be, if you're not one of those people, I think that's okay. And I think it's okay to be a jack of all trades, because what you will do, right, if you're smart, and if you're somewhat thoughtful, is you'll begin to apply those skills into areas and things that you're interested in, problems that you want to solve, in areas that you want to be involved in. And so that's my generic advice. Take it with a grain of salt, and hopefully it resonates.
Well, thank you for the advice. Yeah, and thank you so much, Tony, for being part of this video. And I've definitely learned a lot from this video.
Awesome. Well, Janet, thank you so much for having me on Janet Asks. I think this is an amazing service that you're doing, and feel free to ping me if I can answer any questions in the future.
Thank you. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope you learned a lot about being a business development manager from Tony. He gave a lot of very good insights and advice. And if you want to learn about another specific career, please comment down below and I'll try to cover that career in future videos. And if you like this type of video, please like and subscribe. And if you want to follow more updates, please follow my Instagram. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a good day. Bye.